Brenna Sniderman ticks so many boxes as a content leader. Her backstory features comms roles and research roles, but also 7 years in the media at Forbes Insights, which was, if you remember, that publisher's groundbreaking thought leadership push. And now she's got 11 years at Deloitte. But hers is a career still on the rise, and I could see why when I met her in Philadelphia. She's a big thinker on trends, whether it's AI's use as a partner for teams, or on ROI in relation to the classic making, shaping and taking of markets. Spoiler, thought leadership plays in the first two. Especially stay until the part where she talks about those starting out, asking questions. Quote, especially if no one else is asking them. I love what she said about that. We can get behind that. We can get behind so much of what she said. So, coming up, please enjoy our next SenseMaker session interview.
And now, as part of Collective Content SenseMaker Sessions podcast, today's content leader is Brenna Sniderman, Managing Director, Center for Integrated Research at Deloitte. With thanks to our sponsor, Highbeam Global, a global full-service market research firm. Today's episode was filmed October 2025 at Video City Production Studios in Philadelphia.
So, Brenna Sniderman, welcome to our SenseMakers podcast series. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
We'd love to find out, a lot of things about your career, about the job you're doing now. We'd like to find out about your origin story and what makes you tick. Tell us, how did you start on this journey to become a content leader?
Sure. So I will start at the very beginning.
Okay.
I went to undergraduate here in Philadelphia, where we're recording, and then moved to New York after graduation to start, a job and figure out what I wanted to do. And it wasn't so common at the time. It's much more common now. But I spent, I'd say, the first 5-6 years of my career really moving from job to job every year. So really trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I think it is still fairly common, but it's hard to know precisely what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I tried out some things, tried out other things, realized the things that I enjoy the most and the things that I feel I'm best at are writing and communicating, mm-hmm. and really unpacking and trying to understand complex topics, why they work the way they work, why things are the way they are, and being able to communicate them to people, which is it's something that you don't realize that how important it is until you see it done not very well. And
right.
So it's something that I really found that not only is it something that I enjoy and I'm good at, but I really had a passion for. And so I started slowly working my way into roles that would allow me to research and write and communicate. Mm-hmm. I started with public relations, doing a lot of research to help us, help my previous firms understand how to connect with clients and what pain points were with clients. And then I moved into the media space, worked for the Associated Press for a while, helping to understand the different modes of communication and how things were shifting. And this was at the time when social media was really starting to become a new method of communication that a lot of media companies were really challenged by. And during that time, I also went to graduate school in the evenings. That the point of my program was strategic communications, to really help understand how to take complex topics and break them down and make them understandable for different groups of people, and not only make them understandable, but help people figure out what to do with that information. Not just, this is cool to know, but what do I do about it? And then I found my way to Forbes, which was a really exciting time because Forbes was starting a thought leadership group called Forbes Insights.
I remember it very well, and the many illustrious people who contributed to that.
Yeah. And it was a really exciting time career-wise because not only did I get to bring together all these things that I really cared about, but I got to be part of something that was starting fresh.
Right.
And it was a really exciting group of folks, and we were just figuring it out as we went, and it was great. So I spent about 7 years there, and then moved to Deloitte almost 11 years ago. And
Yeah. So those two have been the big two
Yes.
career moves, really.
That's right.
And one thing I saw from the outside before we even spoke was you have this combination. So you've mentioned, media, PR, research kind of throughout, Big Four now as well. It's kind of I wouldn't say unique, maybe it's not absolutely unique, but it's kind of unusual to have that much rounded experience.
Yeah.
Which must really work for your role now.
It does. Specifically for my specific type of research, I think it really does.
Okay.
I also think the breadth of experience that I have outside of my career, from what I studied in college to all of those other things, I think helps to bring together multiple different constructs of thinking in a way.
What was that? What did you study in college?
Studied economics
Okay.
and international relations. And
Okay,
I think
yeah.
that gives you a real breadth of just liberal arts understanding.
I thought you were going to say something completely randomly different, but that is absolutely very applicable to
Yeah,
everything you do
yeah.
now. So that works, yeah. And so you kind of touched on this, what makes you tick professionally in that kind of skill set and the making sense of the complexity, which is a big thing for us. We love that. And then personally, though, you have to feel motivated and like you enjoy that life.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself?
So a few things. I am a voracious reader. I don't care what I'm reading. I will read anything.
Okay.
I love to learn new things, and I don't care what the thing is. The more arcane and strange, the better. So
Yeah.
lots of crazy stuff. I also am a distance runner, so I do a lot of running. And during my runs, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Again, I don't care about the topic. I just love to learn new things, and I'll come
Yeah.
home. And at one point, I listened to like a 3-hour podcast series on pigeons, and I came home. Guys, this is so great.
I got to ask, do you have that thing where do you always plan what you're going to listen to, or do you have that moment where you're kind of heading out the door and you're fumbling around, and that's where some of the serendipity
It
happens?
kind of depends. It
Okay,
kind of depends.
okay.
Because so I have a list of go-to podcasts, and if they don't have
Right.
anything new, then I have to find something
Okay,
else.
yeah.
And it's funny though, because this is ironic because we're on a podcast, but I'm very particular about the types of podcasts in terms of voices. I don't like lots of like sound effects. I just like it when people
Okay,
are talking.
okay, okay.
And but yeah, sometimes I will plan things out and have a stack, depending on how long my run is, a stack of podcasts, and sometimes I just figure it out as I go.
Yeah, yeah. And what else? I mean, you enjoy living in this part of the world, and
I do. So so there's a lot of other things that I really enjoy doing. I'm taking an art class. I love my dog.
Right.
But it's very interesting, particularly right now, to observe what's going on, to read we've come of age, I think all of us, at a very interesting time where social media, the internet, all these things really arose with us. And so for me, the wealth of information at our fingertips is still very exciting in a way that I observe in my children is they don't even question it. And it's second nature to them. Like we were having a conversation about going to the library to research, and this was a totally foreign thing that,
interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, so I guess to go back to your question about things that, I do in my personal life, I'm very much an introvert. And so I really like to have alone time, whether it's to read or learn or run or, I find that to be a very replenishing time for me. And I also find it to be very meditative because when I come back to work, I've worked out a lot of questions. And so I have solutions and things I've been thinking through that have marinated. Yeah.
Okay. And I wonder if there's some connection there. So with things like deep research and maybe going to some libraries and places where perhaps there's material that's not online, all that kind of thing. Just as it gives you energy in many aspects of your life, maybe in your career, those finding the answers that way, maybe that's something we can talk about. And
well, and I liken it a little bit to, when you would study a lot in school and then you would fall asleep and then you would wake up and it had sort of baked into your brain.
Right.
I feel like the time away from something is every bit as important as the time you're with it, because you need that time to digest it, to synthesize it, to sort of inculcate it into all the other things that and I found that to be really, really critical.
Okay, interesting. I think we should come back to that. Let's talk about your current role.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the Deloitte Center for Integrated Research. What is that?
Sure. So it is part of what we call research and insights within Deloitte. So Deloitte has, unsurprisingly, a lot of different groups within it. And there is a research group that is specifically focused on thought leadership, and that's the group I'm part of. And there are multiple centers within research and insights. The majority of them are focused on industries. So, life sciences and healthcare, financial services. We have a center that focuses on economic indicators.
Right.
And then there is my center, which is cross-industry, cross-business, really looking at strategic and emerging topics that will impact any organization, any leader, but really the big sort of significant strategic questions that organizations of any stripe need to be asking themselves.
Okay.
So those are the topics we focus on.
And are you always working with other parts of the firm
Yes.
to then support in their endeavor, whatever that may be?
Yeah. So what we do is I would describe it as a bit of a think tank within Deloitte. So we do spend a fair amount of our time as a group researching, trying to understand, and each individual within my center has an area of expertise that they tend to focus on. And they will also work very closely with members of the practice, whether it's a consultant or an audit or tax, to say, we're seeing this thing. How does this connect to what you're seeing? And we determine together whether that is a topic that we think would be of interest to dive deeper into. And then we spend some time, doing research, determining what type of research to do, and then sort of figuring out what to do with the insights once we get them.
So it's pretty strategic for the firm. Okay.
Yeah.
And we ask this question of everyone about your role and team and structure. And different people give us different amounts of detail, but we'd love to hear how you're structured, because there'll be your peers listening and comparing, just as you would listen to them.
Sure. I report into the head of research and insights.
Okay.
So each center has a leader, and that's who we report into. But we also have folks from throughout the firm, senior partners that are on governance bodies for each center, almost focusing as a bit of if you were in academia, a board that really helps determine whether there's validity to what you want to look into and whether there is relevance to what the firm cares about. Because as interesting as research is, we can't just go out and research everything. But the nice thing about that particular board is it also keeps us from becoming too ivory tower, because these are individuals who are out with clients every day and who are talking to people out, in the market, and can say to us, this is a great idea, but you need to bring it down to a level of practicality that is going to be relevant for folks. And so that we find is very helpful. That combination can be really powerful.
And so it's not, in your case, it's not like you report into a CMO in a marketing team or a chief strategy officer or anything like that. Okay, it's that very, the integrated bit I'm getting quite clearly. Okay, great. Sticking with research then, there seem to be a lot of changes which are going on. Tell me about that. That's not my specialist area, especially. So, but you just tell us what the changes are.
Oh gosh, that's a broad question.
Well,
I mean, it's there are a lot of changes. I think we can chunk them out into many different areas. There's the differences in what's going on in the world. So I think socioeconomically, there's just a lot of shifts taking place that really impact what we research. And just the fact that we all know that sort of timelines and development cycles are getting sped up and sped up and sped up. So there's less of a window to talk about something new before it's not new anymore.
Right.
So I think that's one piece of it. I think another piece is just the proliferation of information and content out there. It's hard to think about how to be a signal in all that noise, number one. And number two, how to say something that is meaningfully different and insightful in a way that other people aren't, because there's so much out there. So that's number two. I think number three is also the technological shifts, the use of AI, which is both making content more proliferous, or that's not even a word. It's proliferating content. I'm just going to make up words as we go.
No, we're going to use that from now on. That's
absolutely.
Good.
Strategic communication. That's what I'm good at. But I think that it's speeding up certain cycles, enabling us to get through and find information faster. But at the same time, it also puts a lot more pressure on people to either use the tools in a way that are going to be transformative, or figure out sort of the best places where those tools can add the most value. So I think those are some of the changes that are going on. I think there's also an increasing just desire for people to want to understand what's coming next. And it's less, how can we make sense of what's going on right now, so much as how can we future-proof ourselves for what's coming next. And that shift is, it's nuanced, but it's an important one.
Okay. And to state the obvious, that's difficult, right? I mean, there are plenty of bad predictions, some of which get forgotten through history, but sometimes comes and bites people on the what. And with the changes in research, I'm especially thinking about the how rather than the what. So you mentioned AI for one thing, like Gen AI. Where's that definitely made a difference, a positive already, and where is the jury still out?
So I think it's made a tremendous difference for us in a lot of ways. And it's not just AI, I think, in terms of technologies that has really transformed the way that we do research. We have a data science team that's fantastic, and they've enabled us to, or helped us build a lot of different types of models to do a lot of different types of analysis and to pull in data sources from a lot of different places so that we don't always have to just rely on the traditional survey and qualitative interviews, but finding data from a lot of different places and figuring out where the insights lie in that. And we have used some, different types of AI to help us do that, whether it's natural language processing or other types of things to synthesize data. I think the other ways that AI has been useful for us is, it used to be that you would aggregate a lot of information and then you would have to read through all of it and synthesize it. A lot of the AI tools, the enterprise tools, are very helpful at, pulling together a lot of information and helping you pick out the most important points. Of course, you have to validate that, but I
was going to say, right? Yeah. So you have to check, you have to really bring that expertise still, but just the sheer quantity of
the quantity to just sort of help you start to make sense of things.
Yeah.
I've also found that it can be very helpful for us. Like, we have tools that a lot of our data is very applicable to lots of different sort of job functions and roles.
Okay.
And so our data science team has built a tool that enables us to take a piece of research we've already done and sort of reframe it or revise it so that we can write it in a language that's relevant for a CIO. And then we can do a different version that's relevant for a CFO. Yeah. And it enables us to do that much faster. So I've found that AI has been a really good partner for our team in terms of helping us to move through things more quickly and to do things that were more complex than before. I think we're still at the very, very beginning of understanding what we can use it for and how.
And so when you talk about the data and the data scientists you work with, is that are they using tools that you guys are developing yourselves? Are they off the shelf from third parties? How does it work? How do you do that?
So they are developing a lot of the tools ourselves.
Yep.
So one of the things that's great about this team is when we're working on a project, we will say, this is what we're trying to figure out. And this is our hypothesis. This is what we're trying to understand. And they will work with us to figure out, well, what's the right methodology to do that? We have all of these data sources at our fingertips. Let's look at what we have. How might we build this? And so it's a really great group of folks that are just really expert at what they do. And what's nice about it is they're also not shy about teaching individuals on my team how to do some of these things so that we don't need to bother them for the stuff that for them is like kindergarten level, but for us feels really smart. And that's been really great. I think they continually enable us to level ourselves up in terms of the sophistication of the research that we do.
Right.
And in suggesting things that, many of us didn't even know were possible before, but now are with all of these different tools.
Okay, that sounds like a good shout out to those colleagues of yours. So let's talk about how this then translates to content that really cuts through, because that's I guess the goal for most of the companies out there that we know and talk to. And again, coming back to that word unique, it's very hard to be like definitively unique, but just to cut through and stay true to who you are as a firm. What decisions are you making? Like, what makes you go with one particular line of content and not another?
Sure. It's a good question. I think it's very dependent on the research that we're doing. So we don't ever like to say at the beginning of a project, this is going to be a paper.
Right. You're not just backwards engineering something. So we need some stuff to justify this. Okay.
Well, and I think the other thing I'll note is it's taken us a while to get to this point, but we also realize that it's not just about one big piece. Often the research we're doing has so much insight in it that there's no way that we can just do one thing with that. And so what we've tried to get better at is if we've done a big research study and gotten a lot of data, there might be 5 or 6 actually really interesting separate pieces that are much more targeted and much more specific and much more tangible for an audience to read. And so, so one example is we've been doing work over the last several years on tech value and investments in technology and what's the right mix of specific technologies, talent, and a strategy for the organization to improve the market cap for an organization. And we've been able to do a lot of different types of analysis to be able to do that. And so each piece of that research builds upon the piece before, but uses different data sets and different methodologies to layer onto it. And there's no one piece that encapsulates the entirety of it.
Okay.
And so we have been able to not only have a conversation with clients in an ongoing way to build upon it, but also any single one of those individual bits of research can be pulled out and stand on its own, so that somebody who's only interested in understanding this particular thing can go and look at that. And so I think providing that optionality for your audience is going to be very important, in even more so in the future. People oftentimes, for better or worse, just want to see the thing that is most relevant to them at that moment. So being able to provide that is very important.
Absolutely. And I was going to say also having that open mind to see what the data really shows, and then decide on what stories you want to go with to which groups of people. And I was going to say, is that you? Are you making those calls?
I hope so. Well, yes and no. So it's me and the researchers on my team and the practitioners in the practice. And the thing for me, I think you brought up a key point that I want to hone in on. If you're going into a research project with the answer already in mind, then there's no reason to research it, because you already know what you're going to find out. The point for us is the research questions we ask should be valuable enough to our clients and our audience that the answer itself is almost secondary, although the answer is very important. It's the fact that we are tackling this question and helping you understand it. Because to me, I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the most difficult sort of nuances of research is people are so busy trying to find the answer that they don't often stop to ask themselves what the question is. And so I think one of our most critical roles in my center is to help the practitioners and our clients get clear on what it is they're actually asking and what they want to know.
Yeah, it's that classic art of asking good questions.
Yeah.
For me to rip off HBR and that whole article from whenever. But absolutely, we say the same thing. And the ability to ask great questions, it doesn't just come from one career path. But I am tempted to say that whether you're in journalism, PR, market research, Big Four, that's you.
Yeah.
Right? So
why do you want to know this?
Turns out you're really well qualified. So yeah, great to have you here. Let's go back to AI, and especially with my content hat on. I'm asking everyone, what are you most optimistic and pessimistic about? Because there's plenty to talk about.
Sure. I think what I'm most optimistic about is all the different ways that it can help us get deeper into the data and information. And I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of how we can do that. How can it help us interrogate questions more deeply? How can it help us find layers to data that we weren't aware of? We have started using AI a little bit, to your point about all of the content out there, to help us understand the white space. What are people not talking about? Where are there interesting intersection points where we could be thinking about these things? And to me, using it as a thought starter to help us figure these things out is incredibly exciting. I think where I get pessimistic is we don't want to use it as a substitute for our thought or for critical thinking. We want to use it as something that will help us, but not do our thinking for us.
Yeah. And how does that look sort of week to week, day to day across a team? If you're trying to maintain those standards and maybe the more junior members of a team who are like, have not.
Oh, they're teaching us everything.
Okay. So, but I get you help each other, and that it's not about age or anything like that. But it's maintaining those standards and maintaining that you have to be the critical thinker in that. Is that just like from the top, or are you all kind of organically knowing that's the right thing to do?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you don't get into a job like this if you don't really love thinking and critical thinking. Right. And so I don't think, at least in my own personal experience with the folks that I work with, both in my center and the other centers that I work so closely with, that is one of the most enjoyable parts of the job and one of the most fulfilling parts of the job. And the other thing about an AI tool is it can really only draw on what's already out there. And so for us, we want to be able to offer something that's new. Having an understanding of what's already out there is incredibly helpful to help us think about what's going to be new.
Yeah. Okay. I need to move on to
Sure.
the subject of ROI. So you're doing all this investment, not just AI, but like lots of areas. And there's always somebody who's saying like, why do we spend all this money? What's it really do for us? How do you, in particular at your firm, how do you measure this and justify it?
Well, that is the $1 million question, literally.
Probably a bit more than $1 million, I'm guessing, but yeah.
So there's a lot of ways. I mean, there's the traditional ways of how much engagement you're getting, how many downloads, all of that. I think there's also what we've been trying to get a better handle on is how many questions do we get about this? How many clients ask to find out more? How many times has a team come to us and said, we'd love to understand this data better so that we can share it? Those kinds of things are actually much more important and much more difficult to quantify because we're not a media organization, to your point, in that, we don't need 1 million views on a piece of research for it to make a difference. And so making sure that we are getting it in the hands of the right people is part number one. I think part number two is, are we, the firm, Deloitte, being seen as a thought leader in this space? So are we being mentioned elsewhere as, Deloitte is the leading thinker on this? That's incredibly important. For us, we like to talk about, there's the 3 phases. There's making markets, shaping markets, and taking markets. And thought leadership is really in the first 2, the making markets and shaping them. So we are often out there talking about things that maybe our firm isn't doing yet, but should be.
Right.
But we're helping open up the aperture for clients and potential clients as to this is something we should all be thinking about. Or for something that is a little bit more established, how can we shape it so that people understand the way that we think about it is unique? And so to the extent that we can measure that, which is challenging, and see, how often are we cited? How often do we come up in these types of conversations? That's a really important metric for us.
Okay. So I wanted to drill down on at least one, maybe 2 things there. And you mentioned some of the things, so conversations with would-be clients, meetings that are had, all these things which don't lend themselves necessarily to a nice, neat dashboard from other worlds that we all know and love, or maybe not always love. But, it's qualitatively hard to keep track of some of those things, yet we all, and I think even the most senior person in every company knows instinctively those are the good things that really make a difference. They build relationships and they get you there over the long term. Are you literally tracking that kind of thing as it happens?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
But I will never in a million years say that we're doing this with 100%
right.
Ability, because we are also very dependent on people coming back to us and telling us, or when we take part in these conversations, to know that they happened. So I don't quite know what the multiplier effect is for every one we know about, how many others are there.
Yeah.
But I think oftentimes just a few impactful stories are enough. I've also found that much like consulting itself, this is a very relationship-driven role where we have certain people that we work with as thought partners that come back to us again and again within the firm, and we know they're going to use our work because they have found value in it and because it drives value with the conversations that they're having. And so having that sort of repeat relationship is also, for us, a mark of, ROI as well, because, if they don't find it valuable, they're not going to come back and keep asking us.
Yeah. So I think that's an ongoing thing. And we see that from all the companies we work with. They all have slightly different definitions of what success looks like. And some do their best to really simplify down the metrics. Others have dashboards and kind of more data than you really know what to do with. And we still, even now here, it's very common for people to say we fall back on the regular metrics of how much has this been opened, how far has someone read a page, all those things. And I get that, because there's now 25 years of common understanding across companies that people do get that when they maybe don't understand certain other metrics. I'm wondering, I'm certainly not thinking about Big Four, but I'm thinking about just general companies out there who are finding their way with content. Is there something about your model that is applicable to them in terms of trying to understand the ROI of what, and they put things out in the wild, It could be deeply based in research. It could be something a bit more provocative and from the experience of someone who works there. Are there things that you would say, like, yeah, we think every company should be doing this, or is some of it really like, no, this is not for everyone?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I mean, to the extent that one can, I think everybody should be tracking what clients are seeing this.
Right. Right.
What conversations has this gone into? How often have we been asked to customize or do custom research, like taking the data that we've gathered for something else and drilling down for a specific conversation? I think that is critically important. I don't know that there's any one metric I would say everyone should aim for, because to your point, people will always default to the quantitative because it's easy and it's tangible. I think well, this is a very researcher answer, but it depends. I think it really depends on what your goal for that particular piece of research is to help you determine how you should measure the success of it. Because we do research where the sole purpose of it is to raise a new idea, a completely new idea, and to just say, this is a thing that we've noticed. We think it's a really big deal. More to come. And now we'll spend some time researching it. But I think that the goal for that particular research or that particular content piece is very different than the goal of another piece. And so understanding the objective or the goal of the piece of content that you're putting out, I think, is the most important way to help measure if it's doing what it is you want it to do.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah. That's really good. And I wonder, how often are those things that you're putting out there, how often are they very niche? So it could be about some aspect of audit and the law and you name it. Or how often are they like big trends that you're just trying to sort of be a shaper of where certain things are going? Or could it be both? Yeah,
it's hard. There's no one good answer because we don't divide it up in a pie chart and say 40% of our time is this and 20% of our time is that. But there are also times where, to the point about something that is just raising an issue, we know this is a thing. We know it's important. It's going to take us a really long time to dig into this, but we also don't want to lose that time in the market as being the ones to raise this issue.
Okay.
So, it's a way to say, like, guys, this is something we all need to pay attention to.
Yeah. And do you feel that pressure to be leading on some of those subjects? Because your competition is we know these companies, some of them are in the series. And like, you're all really smart, and the competition is fierce, and it's really hard to be distinctive and credible at the same time.
It's fierce, but I wouldn't say that we're not, riding at dawn against each other.
No, it's quite collegiate. I get that.
But
I get that.
I think, well, I think there's also, one of the other goals is not necessarily leading the conversation, but joining the conversation too is incredibly important.
Right.
So again, that goes back to, there are different goals for different types of research or different types of content. But there are things where we do have something different to offer than our competitors by dint of the things that differentiate us from our competitors. So some of them may have something to say that ties back very well to things that they do very well, and for us, we focus on the things that we do very well. So I think there's ways to differentiate the things that you produce based on what you want to take to market.
But if you have something insightful to share, and that's maybe based on some research you've done, it becomes great content, you wouldn't shy away from it because it's something you're less well known for. If you've still got insights that help,
I think that's true.
I think you get a lot of credibility from that, right? That's, okay.
Well, and I think that gets back to the whole idea. I think you're right about credibility. Just because we're less well known in an area, A, doesn't mean we're any less expert in it. But B, we might also be trying to build our credibility in a space that we're newly entering. And so that's another area where thought leadership can be a very valuable tool in helping to credentialize a leader or an individual to say, we've thought deeply about this and we understand it.
Okay. Well, I would love to ask you about like where you see thought leadership going, and then I want to like get to just like a personal wrap up on this. But first of all, like where do you see the next sort of few years? Any big trends in thought leadership?
I mean, I think a lot's going to change in the next few years. I think, to your point earlier, it's impossible to predict where things are going to go because, what I thought was going to happen yesterday isn't going to happen.
Okay.
But I think that thought leadership will become a lot more critical. I think particularly because there is so much material out there, the stuff that's really, really good and insightful is going to become a lot more important.
Okay. So it's quality over quantity.
Yeah, that's what I think personally. Yeah.
Distinctive, makes a difference. I think you said. I've spoken to a couple of people, and it's about making sure the impact, you're really doing a great job. And we see it that way as well. I mean, and you, as consumers of content, whether it's business or in our personal lives, whatever, you notice when someone has really gone that extra yard or 1,000 or whatever, you know. Yeah. Okay. I hear you. I wanted to finish on just a personal side question as well. And we ask everyone this really, which is a kind of, if you could go back and you could speak to your younger self. So I'm thinking when you were graduating, right? You're out of college or at that kind of era. Now you know the twists and turns that we began this conversation with, culminating in most of the time at Deloitte and before that at Forbes. But you know, with the different twists along the way, what would you say to that kind of 22-year-old self, maybe?
God, so much. No, I think that it's okay to ask questions, particularly if nobody else is asking them. And the reason I say this is I feel like my own personal continuum with respect to thinking and feeling like a thought leader or an expert, I feel like it followed a very distinct path where, you know, you sit in a room and everyone around you's talking and you're just listening because you want to understand what's going on. And you think, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm going to listen to these people. And then stage 2 for me was when I had a thought in my head and someone in the meeting said that thought. And I was like, okay, I'm getting this because I'm thinking the things that are important to think. And then the third stage for me was I'm sitting in a room and I'm thinking something no one else is saying. And I'm thinking, I better keep my mouth shut because I'm going to sound stupid by coming out and saying something that no one else is saying. And then the fourth stage, which it took me a while to get to, was I need to say this thing because no one else is thinking this thing.
Yeah.
And I think what I would have told my younger self is you will get to that point. It's okay to ask the questions or point out the things that no one else is pointing out. You're not going to sound as dumb as you think you will.
I think that's a fantastic way to be wrapping this up. I hope there are some people out there as well that get to hear this and they're at those stages 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And they realize, lots of people go through this, including Brenna. And I want to say a big thank you. I want to also say, don't get too weirded out when you listen back to your own podcast and hear yourself, because I really hope you do. But I want to thank our audience for today's episode, our sponsor, and especially to you, Brenna Sniderman. Thank you for being a sense maker with us.
Yeah.
This was the Collective Content Podcast, Sensemaker Sessions. Let us know what you'd like us to make sense of next.